and welcome everyone to another episode of End the Lie Radio. Of course, I am your humble host, as always, Madison Rupert, and my website is endthelie.com. Please be sure to scroll down there to the bottom to check us out on the various social media networks. Our Facebook page continues to grow rapidly, and there tends to be some lively discussion going on in the comments of the posts over there. So please, over there, of course, you're listening to us here on UCY.tv, and we have a wonderful show lined up for you today. Today we have on Justin Machacek, and he is one of the founders of the American Liberty Association, and you can check them out at AmericanLibertyAssociation.com. And we're going to be talking a little bit about his organization, the philosophy that's behind it, and have a little conversation around that. And I'm sure you are definitely going to want to hear a lot about this and what you can do to support their efforts. Justin, thank you so much for coming on.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Well, first, tell us a little bit about the American Liberty Association. I'm under the impression that it's a relatively new organization. Is that correct?
Yes, we are in our infancy here. The American Liberty Association was conceived of probably throughout the last 3 months, and we've really just gotten off the ground in the last 6 weeks here. We started a nonprofit organization in the state of Texas, and we're in process of building out the board and the website and everything else, and we're trying to get the word out as quickly as we can to help find supporters and people that are like-minded and want to promote liberty through the culture. So.
Well, that's awesome, and I think you'll find a lot of our listeners are very like-minded. But tell us a little bit about the philosophy behind the organization. What spurred you to start it? And I must say it's awesome that we caught you here at the infancy, so we can help promote you and get you some more support. But tell us a little bit about what is behind it for those who are maybe too lazy to read through your mission statement.
Sure. The American Liberty Association is essentially Judeo-Christian values. We're not a religious organization, but we're based in Judeo-Christian biblical values and libertarian political philosophy. So we, at the heart, we believe that everybody has God-given rights, or rights that are natural. Some people would prefer to call it natural law. And we think that when any government starts to try to abridge those rights, that we have the right and even the obligation as a people to appeal to heaven, to appeal to a higher power from where those rights come. Because obviously, if those rights aren't given by a government, if they're given from God or from nature, then no government can take them away. So that's really the heart of where we are. And so we've created the organization to give a platform for people who believe in that and who want to come together to get that message out. And we have 3 pillars, if you will, which would be limited government, fiscal responsibility, and individual liberty. And we believe that through those three areas, we can begin to educate the populace as to why smaller government and libertarian philosophy is a better route than a nanny state or a government run system. So.
Well, it seems like the founding fathers very much agreed with your perspective in saying that we're endowed with certain unalienable rights. Can you speak to that, especially given that today so many people in government apparently think that many of these rights actually aren't unalienable. In fact, they're very alienable, so to speak, depending on the situation. If they can conjure a justification, they can claim we no longer really have the right to life nor liberty. I mean, how do you view that kind of battle today, especially given what the founding fathers said on the matter?
This is part of the education process, right? This is part of the slippery slope that we've sort of been lulled into believing as an American society in the, in the 21st century here. Is we have a culture now, or a mentality that believes that they are willing to give up their rights or surrender those rights, to be protected, or to be, in the name of safety. And we know that, as our founder said, that anyone that would give up their rights or their freedom for some temporary security deserves neither. The founders, it's funny you say that, because part of what the American Liberty Association is about, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus, and I'm a devout church attender and those sort of things. But the reason we set up American Liberty Association as a Judeo-Christian value, and not as a religious organization, but just as a values-based organization, is our founders had varying religious views. There was a lot of differing views, and the states actually individually had a lot of different sects of Christianity. There were deists like Jefferson and Franklin. There were Baptists. There were more Orthodox Christians. There were Quakers, and all these different folks. They were all a bit skeptical of each other, and they all wanted to govern themselves and run their communities the way they felt the need to do it. In the Revolutionary War, they essentially unified through that difference. They said, you know what, we all want the freedom to worship and to live and to govern ourselves the way we want to do it. And so let's come together to fight for that freedom and that liberty, to be able to protect that right. And so, yeah, absolutely. Our founders, through the various, theologies and ideologies that they had, came together to unite, to fight the Revolutionary War and die. So part of the culture, part of what we're fighting in this culture is not just the idea that these are God-given rights, but it's also the willingness to fight to protect them. And so, we hope to sort of light the brush fires in the hearts of people again, to have them rise up and stand up for their rights, and not just, give them a pass when the SWAT's knocking on your door, or, just, kind of surrender to the police state just because you think, you have to. It's, we're wanting to wake people up and sort of shake them out of the complacency. So, but yes, there's a very rich history, and a lot of that history is what we've kind of built into our brand at the American Liberty Association. So,
well, one thing I find very interesting is your kind of Judeo-Christian based approach to this issue, and I say that because I've seen very recently, more so than in the past, a kind of atheistic contingency to the so-called liberty movement, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of a broad label, because there are so many different people coming at it from different angles. But even in the so-called truth movement as well, they're kind of related. There has been this kind of anti-Christian sentiment. One thing that comes to mind, or one individual, I should say, that comes to mind is Adam Kokesh, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he's got a pretty popular show that's online now. It used to be on Russia Today, but I've brought it up before. not on the show, but on various social networks and stuff, there is some extreme ignorance when it comes to some of the things that people say that just, being someone who actually cares about history, it makes me pull my hair out when people start talking about the canon of the Bible and the Council of Nicaea. It's like, no, what have you been reading the Da Vinci Code? But
Sure.
this kind of stuff comes up, and they say, oh, Christianity, some evil control system, and all this stuff. I mean, what do you say to people who have this kind of anti-Christian view? They think Christianity and liberty, they're diametrically opposed to one another. What do you say to that kind of person?
Well, I think they're confused, and that's okay. Adam's doing a good work. He's getting the word out for the liberty movement, and he's doing a great job when it comes to getting the message of sort of an anti-government ideal out there. But I'm not sure about him. I can't speak for him, but there are many in the movement that would advocate anarchy. Ironically, when you follow anarchy to its end, it ends in mob rule and eventually tyranny. So if you're truly liberty-minded, you understand that government is a necessary evil, but it's a matter of putting the necessary restrictions on that government, like our founders did, to set up a republic, to keep it decentralized, to keep the power in the hands of the many rather than the hands of the few. So these are things that these are ideas and concepts that come about. God in the Bible, in Kings, I believe it's I don't want to quote the chapter because I'll say it wrong, but Israel demanded a king. They wanted a king, and the prophet said, no, you don't want a king, because if I give you God told the prophet, if I give them a king, he'll take their land, he'll put their sons and, to the battlefield. He'll use their women for his own good, and he'll ultimately become an oppressor over them. And the prophet came back to the people, and the people said, no, we want a king. And so this is sort of the first stage of when you see a society move away from self-governance and the governance of having the liberty, if you will, to do as as their God would have them to do, versus a civil government or a king over them. And certainly if you say it's anti-Christian, or that Christians are evil, I think I think maybe some of that comes from many of the people that would be pushing a theocratic agenda, so to speak, an agenda that would advocate setting up a church state in a way, or some sort of national religion, or saying that America is a Christian country. I mean, certainly we're set up on Christian values, but the idea that we're only Christian, if you're going to say that, what version of Christianity are you talking about? So it's easy for an Adam Kokesh to sort of take a target at a broad group of people, and when the message gets misconstrued in such a way, it's an easy target for him to go at that. So I don't necessarily blame him, but I would certainly say that folks that would espouse that we're not that Christianity is somehow anti-liberty, or not understanding the true religion there.
I think I don't want to badmouth him too much in that regard, because he does have a very legitimate point in many respects, in that Christianity has been used as this justification for many horrible things throughout the years. But I've been accused myself of engaging in the kind of no true Scotsman fallacy by saying, well, if you use Christianity to support crusades and forcing people to convert at the edge of a sword and this kind of stuff, well, it's not really Christianity. And they say, oh, that's fallacious. Well, I don't agree. You can't call yourself a philanthropist when you've never given a cent to charity. It just makes sense. There's some certain definitional aspects of Christianity that you can't completely calling yourself a Christian.
I agree. I think this is what we get into in this modern society, is this redefining of words. People say Christianity, and it says, well, what is Christianity? And so Christianity has become defined by the Crusades or the medieval times or the Roman Catholic Church or some of the atrocities that have happened over the years, when in reality these things are far, far away from the teachings that Jesus espoused, right? It's sort of like the word conservative. The word conservative used to mean that you would conserve, the traditions. A traditional conservative would have been, non-interventionist. They would have wanted to reduce government, decentralize it to the states. They would have wanted to to keep the government out of the business of the people. But today, conservatives tends to mean perpetuating war and, creating a church state and forcing your ideas on people and legislating morality. Same with liberal. A classic liberal was a person who felt that liberty was important, that you needed the state out of your out of your bedroom and out of your taxes and out of your handbook, and that that liberal mentality now is defined as sort of a socialist agenda. So words matter. I think that's the one thing that people all over the world need to understand, is words matter, and how you define those words matter. And you can't just assume in this in this era of marketing that just because they use a word that they're intending to mean it in the same way that you might interpret it. So you sort of have to really dig down and find out where people are at and what they really believe in. So sure, I think defining Christianity as those atrocities, it's an easy target, but it's not necessarily the truth.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's very easy to kind of, go after the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, when dealing with these complex topics. But I think that does not benefit anyone, and it definitely doesn't contribute to any kind of meaningful dialogue when we, kind of use this kind of approach. But as far as what you guys are doing, tell us a little bit about what your approach is to, especially given. Go ahead, please.
The first thing that we want to do is we want to raise enough money to be able to produce a study curriculum that we'll be able to offer to small groups, that we could send to churches, we could offer to synagogues, or even to people that maybe aren't into that sort of thing, but maybe just people that want to have a gathering at their house and have a conversation about issues of the difference of or the role of civil government, right? So we want to develop this study curriculum to teach biblical liberty and self-governance. So that's our first key objective, is to get that curriculum into as many study groups and churches and areas around the country as we can. We feel like if we can tap into educating people at a ground level in their home, where they're comfortable with their friends and their families, and they can start talking about these things, and we can initiate that conversation, then people will begin to understand the need, or begin to understand what liberty really means, what it is, and how it can really begin to change their lives and their community and their state and ultimately our country.
Well, I think that's an admirable goal, to say the least, and I think that's an approach that's far too often neglected. By that I mean, education. But one question I have, and I think it's something we've seen even more, perhaps in the past couple decades than ever, is the large portion of the United States that is Christian having their values and their beliefs leveraged by one political party or another. Especially the Republican Party does a great job of saying, "Oh, you're a Christian, that means you vote for us." Basically, I mean, what is
Sure.
your take on that?
Well, this is sort of where we need to begin this process. We want to let people know one of the big concerns in the Christian church and I say church in a very broad sense, but one of the big concerns, I guess, in the right is this sort of decadence that they see in society, that they think that there's this moral depravity that has snuck in and has consumed our culture, that it's whether it's violence in video games or whether it's the over-sexualization of the youth, or whether it's just the porn industry going haywire. And so you have sort of this society now, which is, becoming more like ancient Greece and Rome than it is, sort of traditional American, values. So one of the things that we want to begin teaching is that part of the reason that you have that is because the state has expanded, that liberty has been taken away. And as you remove liberty from individuals, you also remove responsibility from individuals. Because if you're free, part of what liberty is the requirement to assume responsibility for the decisions that you make. So if now I tell you, sure, you can spend all your money and travel the world and do as you wish and rack up your credit cards, but you're going to file bankruptcy and you're going to become destitute living on the street, and there's not going to be a social welfare program for you to get by. Well, you might think twice before you go down that road, because there's a certain level of responsibility that comes in. If we have these social safety nets, and we have the government that's creating sort of it's okay, you'll do better next time mentality, we're really enabling the society to get worse and worse, right? So these are when we say self-governance, that's the idea that we want to teach, is that there's, sure, you're free to do whatever you want to do. If you want to jump off a tall building, or if you want to run down the street saying crazy things, that's fine, but there's not going to be a government that's there to support you when you fall. It's going to have to be, you're going to have to pick yourself up on your by your bootstraps, and you're going to have to get back to the traditional way of doing things. And so this is where we hope to maybe put more of the responsibility on the charities and the churches and the not-for-profit groups that have, in a way, become complacent. This is probably where the Adam Kokeshes of the world probably have their biggest argument. If the church would stop or would come out of their complacency, if pastors and priests and rabbis would stop worrying about who the next contestant on American Idol is, and start focusing on infecting their culture and their neighbors, and start helping from that level again, then we would think that you could see sort of a revival, I guess, of the values of the country come back. And we would hope that through charity we could remove some of the social safety nets that are there, or some of the requirements, and these sort of things. I mean, it's a lot to take in, but we think that one step at a time. We think that if we can teach the core values, then the rest will follow, right?
Well, I think this segues into something very interesting that we saw during the presidential race, and that was the question that was asked of Ron Paul, and a lot of people don't realize this if they kind of skimmed his books or haven't really listened to all the things he said. But Ron Paul has been for most of his life and continues to be a very devout, practicing Christian. And it's actually, I read an interesting article that was posted on your site that was originally on the Washington Post. And again, that's AmericanLibertyAssociation.com. But it was originally in the Washington Post, and it was about if Christians can be libertarian. I mean, it actually had some quotes from Ron Paul's books, and they were, I mean, as Christian as could be. And the question that I'm thinking of is when it was in one of the Republican debates, when he was asked about someone who didn't have health care, and if they should be supported. I mean, if they didn't have insurance, is what I meant to say. Should they be given free health care by the state? And he's because it was kind of a loaded hypothetical situation where, there was no kind of third choice where, well, yeah, he could get free health care from a charitable organization. It was either he gets free, health care through state-funded insurance or he dies. And,
Right.
and Ron Paul being a small government advocate said, well, in that situation, he wouldn't get free health care if he didn't have insurance. What is your approach to that? Would you say that is where church-funded hospitals and so on should come in? I mean, I know Ron Paul did a great amount of free health care in his practice as a medical doctor, and I think people overlook that kind of stuff because it sounds really bad when someone says that, and if you don't look at the whole picture, it seems really bad. What is your take on that?
I think that at the American Liberty Association, we think that government is generally the last solution that should be evaluated. That the role of government is really to protect the rights and the freedoms of individuals. And outside of that, the more that they come in and try to influence like a healthcare industry or anything, the more harm they cause. Absolutely, that the reason that many of the hospitals have a Methodist name or these sort of names at the top is because they were founded by churches or charities or these sort of organizations. And when you think about going into how they started regulating the nurses, in the 60s and 70s, and how they started really sort of trying to influence and manipulate the free market, I guess would be the way to say it. We haven't had a free market in healthcare for decades. So this is sort of the natural end with this Universal Health Care Act that we have here, is kind of the natural end of the government manipulation of the market. But if you look at what a doctor, they've got a Hippocratic oath. Their desire, their goal in life is to help people. Most of these guys have gone and they're 8-12 years into their, to their studies and their commitment to their profession to not to harm people, but to help them. So I think if we open the market, if we stop with the regulations, if we begin to look at how we can affect tort reform and removing government regulation and all these sort of subsidies or propping up of big pharma or different, pieces of it, and you get back to the free market, it will provide better health care, better competition. It'll give us a higher quality of service. It will allow the doctors to offer more benevolence, and absolutely, it's not. If you don't have state health care, you die. There's a very big area where we as humans, and especially in a civil society like America, we care about our neighbor and our friends. And, we're not going to, I guess if you look at the Good Samaritan, right, who is your neighbor was the question. And he said, well, if you had two people that saw this man beat up and hurt on the side of the road, are you going to be the person that walks by and, helps care for the person on the side of the road? Or are you going to be the person who, who sort of turns a blind eye and lets them suffer? But the interesting thing about the Good Samaritan was that the man that picked him up, the man that took him to the inn, he didn't call the government and say to the Romans, hey, would you come, take care of this guy? He took him to the inn. He paid the innkeeper. He paid him to take care of him and nurse him back to health, and then he returned to make sure he was okay. So it was really his own personal, resources that were able to get him to that point. I think it was Lou Rockwell that did a pretty decent analysis on that, and I think that was a great example of the free market at work, that here's an individual who, felt the need, had the charity in his heart to influence his neighbor. And this is the parable that Jesus told to the person who said, who is my neighbor? And so sure, that's a big part of the conversation that is not really debated anymore, and it's a shame that people like to dismiss it as quickly as they do.
What you're talking about and how the government actually fails. If the government was tasked with being the Good Samaritan, the people who were in need of help would be in a very bad situation. I can remember in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, I had a friend on Facebook who has a young child, and their house was absolutely destroyed by the hurricane, and they were trying to find shelter and diapers and basic things, and they were actually turned away by the larger charities. They were turned away by specifically, I think they were turned away by the Red Cross. They were turned away by FEMA. FEMA was like, we're not going to help you. And the people who gave them clothes, I mean, everything was destroyed. They were given clothes, they were given food, they were given water, they were given shelter, and so on by, surprise, surprise, local churches. Of which they had no affiliation whatsoever. I mean, these are just random people walking into these churches who are running relief efforts and saying, we desperately need help, and they were not turned away. They were helped completely and put back up on their feet and so on. And the government, of course, was not there to do it at all. So I think that's a kind of tiny example of what we should be seeing on a much larger scale, don't you think?
The free market works. I mean, this is the end, right? Is that if you allow the free market to remain free, it works. People will find a need and they will fill it. The market will say there's a tragedy. The American people will rise up and they will donate tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars to help the Katrina victims or the 9/11 victims or the Boston victims or the West Texas victims. I mean, we understand that there are sort of acts of God that happen. And when those really tragedies happen, we have to, come together as a society and help fill that gap. And if you're free to donate, if you're free to have your money, if you're free to put that money to use, then sure, it's going to be much more efficient. It's going to be much more effective. You don't have the bureaucrats. And this gets down to taxation. At the American Liberty Association, if we talk about limited government and fiscal responsibility, if you allow people to keep the fruits of their labor, it's a much more efficient use of the funds because they can donate to their local church, which then can help distribute those goods to the people. But if now you've got to tax it, and so now we have to send our money to the IRS, so we have to pay the overhead at the IRS, and then that money has to go to the federal government, and we have to pay the overhead at the federal government, and then some of that money might come back to the states, and you have to pay the overhead of the state government, and then it has to get distributed to the charities where you have to pay the overhead there. So you've essentially just created a ton of expense in the chain that really does nothing other than, line the pockets of the bureaucrats that have created the system. So the free market works: less taxation, less government, allowing charities, allowing free markets, allowing corporations to get involved, but at the same time not propping up the corporations. There's some in the GOP that would advocate sort of a corporatist mentality that we need to subsidize ExxonMobil or Big Pharma or these other huge organizations. We don't need to be picking winners and losers. We need to let the free markets dictate what happens, and as long as we as a civil society create a structure that's creating a fair playing field, then the free markets will be allowed to work and win. So yeah, absolutely. Whether it's the Katrina victims or the 9/11 victims or the local farmer that needs to have his crops picked, or even the big business that wants to fix their bottom line on Wall Street, the less government that we have involved and the more the free market can regulate itself, the better off we are.
I think that's a great point, because often nowadays we see the phrase free market kind of manipulated to mean corporatism, essentially. A lot of people, especially, so-called conservatives, they'll say free market, and by that they actually mean what you just said, the government picking the winners and the losers. And we've seen how that is just a miserable failure. That does not work when the government tries to get into private industry and dictate who wins and who loses. What do you say to people who have that kind of skewed concept of the free market that's as we talked about earlier, this kind of redefinition of words? I think that is an incredibly insidious one in particular, because when people think of free market, they think of corporatism, essentially, nowadays. What do you say to someone? How do you, what is that re-education process, so to speak? Not to use that horrible phrase, but how do you teach someone, well, this isn't free market, and here is what a free market actually looks like?
I think the last part of your statement there is how you go about that. You begin to teach what a free market is, and a free market is like a free individual. We have citizens running around who think that they're free right now, when really we've got the TSA that's putting huge, sort of invading our privacy as we try to go through the line of air travel, or we have Big Brother surveillance in many of the downtown areas, or we have them doing warrantless wiretaps, or telling people in Boston to come out of their homes so they can search for one 19-year-old. So people have this impression that they're free. They have this impression that the market is free and that the market is not manipulated. And so, it's kind of almost perpetuated that, it is a free market because, you can invest in Wall Street, or you can shop where you want, but they don't see, or they don't understand that a truly free market allows for competition, and it doesn't restrict permits to certain organizations to, so that they can't be a competitor, or, it doesn't subsidize certain plants for, with pesticides or with these sort of things. There's so many variables in the market where they're picking winners and losers. you have to begin to teach people what a free market really looks like. And so that's the first step. I generally try to take it to a personal level. I think the American Liberty Association, as we build out our curriculum, is going to take it to home. You know, would you rather keep more of your money, or would you rather give me some of your money so that I can figure out how to best use it for, to help your neighbor, right? I guess it's kind of the government system. You say, the government says, well, if you send me 30 cents, then I'm going to pocket 10 cents, and I'm going to take the other 20 cents, and I'm going to hand it to two of my friends, and they're going to figure out, and in the end, you're going to end up getting a nickel to your neighbor, maybe, right? Well, if you were able to keep your 30 cents, then how much of that 30 cents would you give to your neighbor? If you say, well, if I had all 30 cents, then I'd probably give my neighbor 10 cents. Well, then your neighbor's got twice as much money as he would have had before. So these are sort of, you got to break it down on a simple level so that people can begin to apply these things in their own lives and see how it really affects them on an individual level. And hopefully that's what we want to do with with the online articles, with the education process of the study guides, with the American Liberty Association.com site. You know, those are the kinds of things that we just want to begin to influence the culture. I mean, it would be awesome if we, as we grow, to do stuff for children, to be able to teach children this stuff at a young age. You know, they have a certain self-respect. They understand each other. They get property rights really well, right? So this is my toy, not your toy. You know, so these are things we can begin to teach at an early age, and so hopefully as we grow, we can do these things. And that's really what the American Liberty Association is about, is we believe that as we promote the idea and the understanding of liberty, that society will be a better place to live, and it'll be a more prosperous place for everyone. And so that's our goal, and we'll use whatever methods we need to accomplish it. And
well, let me ask you about something that's kind of inseparable from this topic of free markets, and that is the monetary system. What is your guys' position on the system in the United States, and what would you like to see come about in that regard?
I think the Constitution was right. At the American Liberty Association, we believe in sound money. We believe in having a standard of currency that, or at least competitive currencies. I think, again, let's talk about a free market. Currently, in the arena of currencies, we don't have a free market. You have a government-issued note, a currency called the Federal Reserve note, or the dollar, that they have dedicated from a private bank called the Federal Reserve that loans these dollars to the United States, and creates a racket essentially, with this monetary system. Going back to the history, and you mentioned the history early in the interview. The American Liberty Association is kind of rich with history in our brand and everything we're doing with the Liberty pine tree and these sort of things in our logo. And many of the founding fathers were anti-federalists. They did not want a strong central bank. They did not want a strong central government. They really explained that if you allow the central banks to come in, that you'll begin to lose your freedom, and they'll inflate the currency, and they'll do all of these things that we've seen now over the last 100 years. So the American Liberty Association would advocate a competitive currency market where the states would be allowed to coin and create currency, or free market organizations like Bitcoin, or silver manufacturers or gold manufacturers, and that they wouldn't be penalized for creating these currencies or doing these things. So those are some of the things that we need to advocate, is removing the penalties for competing currencies with the U.S. dollar, and to begin to allow consumers, allow taxpayers, allow citizens the freedom to select what they would like to use and what they trust for their currency. And in the end, if the Federal Reserve is competitive enough to maintain the dollar, and the dollar is able to stay stable, then more power to them. They'll have a strong currency. But if people don't necessarily just want to put their faith in what is now the full faith and credit of the United States slipping away day by day, and they want to look at something like a silver coin or a gold coin or a state-issued currency that's backed by something, a basket of goods or something similar, then we should have the freedom and the right to do that. So, interesting. I toured a mint today, and where they coin silver coins, and it's a different feeling when you're holding an ounce of silver in your hand versus holding a U.S. dollar or even a $50 note. There's something about that hard money that that there's that intrinsic value there, and it's not just an IOU. It is actually something of real value. So that would be the American Liberty Association's position.
What I think is very closely related to this issue in particular is the issue of taxes, and I think a large reason why we don't see this kind of thing, and we do see the federal government going after people for even trying to offer any kind of not even just a competing currency, but a different way to exchange, like the individual who was manufacturing the Liberty dollar. I mean, he was treated as a special kind of domestic terrorist for what he was doing, and I think that is largely because there is a very large problem with the IRS not being able to take taxes from direct barter. Is that your impression as well, that a large obstacle to this is the current kind of centralized taxing scheme?
Sure. The thing is, there's a certain practicality to all of this, right? In that the government we're 100 years into the central bank and the Federal Reserve, and in order to end the Fed, as Dr. Paul said, or in order to even begin to create competing currencies, it's going to take sort of a pragmatic approach to how we get there. We're not going to just end it in a day. We're not going to be able to just start changing these things. So some of the smaller things are going to happen at a local and a state level, where they start to say, no, this is a legitimate currency, and people can pay their taxes with another type of currency, or with a barter, or with this or with that. So and I guess going back to some of the biblical examples, that when Christ entered the temple and they had the money changers in the temple, what they were doing is that people would come to the temple to offer their sacrifice, and they wouldn't have a goat or a dove or these certain things for their sacrifice. So they would bring coin, and they would bring them into the temple, and they would hand them to the money changers, and the money changers would sell them a dove. So what they were doing was they're switching currencies, right? They're changing from a coin to a dove, or a coin to a goat, or whatever. So, and then they would use that as their sacrifice. And, Jesus had a big problem with this when he came in. He was very angry, and, upturned the tables and told them they had defiled the house, and that it was supposed to be a house of prayer. And so I think absolutely in a pragmatic sense, in order to get to where we can have that free market back, taxation is going to have to be addressed. The way that people pay for those taxes will have to be addressed, and ultimately people just are going to have to understand more and more that there is another way. So that's part of the hardest part. I guess it was a few months ago, I met with a coworker, and we were talking about the Federal Reserve, and I said, that's a private bank, right? That's not a part of the United States government. And he said, really? I said, yeah, look it up, And so as he began researching it, he began to get the revelation that, wait a minute, this is a separate entity. This is profiting, sort of families around the world, and these owners that are sitting on the board, and and the fact that we can't audit them, and the fact that we have no idea where this money is going. We've got to change some of that, and so it will be a pragmatic approach. I think that's one of the reasons Dr. Paul, pushed so hard to try to get them to open their books, and I think that's one of the reasons they don't want to open their books. But I'm not sure. I think it'll have to happen on a state level and on a local level, and first, and as it gains traction there, we'll begin to see changes in the federal government. So.
Well, I think we've seen already the success that some small-scale alternative currencies have had. They're often based off of, like an hours type system where it's essentially a time exchange. I think just seeing that is even a thing that's taken seriously at all shows how much people realize there is something going wrong here, and there needs to be a change. I want to know a little bit about what the reaction has been. Has it been positive amongst churches and so on when you bring this kind of message and propose this kind of stuff to them?
We've had an amazing reception so far. To date, everyone is excited. They're looking forward to what we're doing. They're thinking that it's needed and that it's a message that has to come out. There's, some people are apprehensive because we do use the word libertarian, and so, there is that. So we try to walk that balance to say that, we're not capital L libertarians, but we believe in a libertarian philosophy. And it's kind of the same on the other side of the coin, that we're not a Christian or a religious organization, but we believe in Judeo-Christian values. So these are, it's a bit of a delicate space, but the idea is that we want to create an environment where individuals or different groups with opposing views can come in and unite around the idea of liberty and the freedom to express those different ideas, and that we'll be an organization that'll help educate people through that process. And pastors have been great, individuals have been great. We're in the last 5 weeks we're already reaching 700 or 800 people or more a week on Facebook, or we're getting good traffic online, but we need money. If people want to donate, or if people want to join as a membership online, anything that people can do. If they want to host a study group, they can sign up online to host a study group when the curriculum comes out. So we're getting to a point now without some fundraising and without the some additional members and people coming in, it's going to be difficult to grow from here. But we hope that people out there will begin to hear the message and want to get involved. So.
Well, we're definitely going to make a concerted effort to help promote you guys as well, through not only the show, but the website and the Facebook page and so on. So hopefully we can expand your reach a little bit, hopefully. But we just have 3 minutes left here. So why don't you take a couple of minutes and tell people how exactly they can get in contact with you, how they can send donations, and you said people can sign up to host study groups and so on. What else can they do to help this effort?
They can go to AmericanLibertyAssociation.com. We have a join form, which is essentially it's a membership form. Right now it's completely free if you sign in. We're designing T-shirts and flags that we hope to have up soon, that will be available to members. They can donate at the donate slot online. Every little bit counts. Right now we're just using a PayPal account to distribute where until we can get the site set up better. But if they click the donate page, it'll take them to PayPal. They can use a credit card or checking account or whatever. It's completely secure and safe. We've got a board of 8 people that will be overseeing the executive team and the finances as they come about, so that we're very much we want to respect people's donations and their gifts, and that we're not here to make a buck or to to get rich. We want to really influence society and get the message out to Christians and Jews and Catholics and Episcopalians and Mormons and everybody who believes in what we call sort of old school Americana values. Just some general common decency, I guess, and we hope that as people join us and come on board, that the movement will grow, and we can provide more resources and materials for people in their study groups and everything else. So AmericanLibertyAssociation.com, and donate or join at the top right of the site.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for coming on. And again, everyone, that's AmericanLibertyAssociation.com. Please do check them out. Like their Facebook page, support their work. Please do donate if you can. You will be helping a very good cause. And stay tuned for more information from them. Help them build up that curriculum through your donations and support. Sign up to host a study group. That would definitely be awesome. And as always, I am your host, Madison Rupert, and you have been listening to End the Lie Radio here on UCY.TV. Of course, my website is endthelie.com. And until next week, everyone, take care. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.